We hope that the information provided in this webinar will serve as a useful overview of this complicated topic and be a resource that you share with others in your community. This Watershed Tools for Local Leaders webinar is intended to support municipal officials and residents who are in a position to educate others and make decisions that impact residents in their town. And we recognize that none of us can be experts in all things, and we are at varying levels of understanding related to water resource issues. We hope that these webinars aid in the understanding of complicated science and regulations, and that we act as a trusted resource and partner to successfully navigate and take action to support the health of our watershed and the people who live here. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Raritan Headwaters, I'm going to try to, sometimes the slides get a little bit sticky, so you have to bear with me. Okay, get to the next one. There we go. Raritan Headwaters is a nonprofit watershed conservation organization that has been working for over 60 years to protect clean water for the residents who live here, as well as those downstream and throughout the state who rely on the water that we protect. Through science and stewardship, including our stream monitoring and well testing programs, annual watershed-wide stream cleanup, education, advocacy, we protect the water in our rivers and our streams and in our homes. In 2011, the Upper Raritan Watershed Association and the South Branch Watershed Association merged to form Raritan Headwaters. And we do have two offices to better serve the residents throughout our 470 square mile watershed. Our headquarters office in the North Branch is located in Bedminster, and our South Branch office, which also serves as our well testing program office, is on Main Street in Flemington. There are also a lot of resources online on our website at raritanheadwaters.org. So I encourage you to explore that. We have some excellent science and conservation resources, information, educational materials, a lot to explore on our website. So have a look when you have time. And again, this presentation will be posted up on our Watershed Tools for Local Leaders webpage that you can find on our website. In our Watershed Tools for Local Leaders seminars, we provide information on key science, planning, and regulatory tools, and partner on projects to identify, protect, and restore water resources. We have a number of presentations planned for the fall and winter, and you can view our archive of past presentations on our website. We'll be covering a lot of ground today, so we won't be diving in too deep into some of the aspects of drinking water supply regulations or hard science, but there will be more in-depth information provided on our site, and please explore that. And as in the coming months, we'll have other resources up there as well, so please check back. So we're here today to talk about drinking water, which is sourced from both surface water and groundwater. So it's important to first give a bit of background on the sources of contamination. And we must recognize that we live in the most densely populated state in the nation, and in a state with a long history of heavy industrial development, which led to widespread air and water pollution. And for decades, industrial chemicals have been dumped into rivers and buried in unregulated landfills, contaminating water and land. Raw sewage was often discharged into rivers and the ocean, and in some areas of New Jersey still is through combined sewer overflows, which are sewers that are designed to collect rainwater runoff and domestic sewage and industrial wastewater in the same pipe. The situation started to improve in 1972 when the Clean Water Act was passed, which gave the EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers the responsibility to regulate water pollution. And incidentally, this landmark legislation will be celebrating its 50th anniversary in just a few weeks on October 18th. There are a number of factors that continue to impact groundwater quality and quantity. And while some groundwater contaminants are naturally occurring, such as arsenic and radionuclides like uranium and radium, others are the results of human activity. Groundwater is susceptible to both point source and non-point source pollutants. These include stormwater runoff, road salts, industry, agriculture, and mismanaged manure, landfills, and septic systems. Luckily, we are protected. In the 1970s, people started to get really fed up with how bad their water was and how sick it was making people. And so they demanded change, and the Safe Drinking Water Act was born in 1974. And this legislation established health-based standards for contaminants and requires notification to consumers when a violation occurs. The Bureau of Safe Drinking Water of the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection has principal responsibility to administer the programs and activities of the Safe Drinking Water Act, both the federal and New Jersey Safe Drinking Water Act, to ensure that safe drinking water is available for the citizens of New Jersey. Unfortunately, this does not protect private well owners, and we'll get to that in a few slides. So I'm just going to give you a little overview of different categories of water supply, and this is important because it does differ as far as responsible parties, the resources available, the requirements for testing and notification, depending on the type of water supply. So public water supplies are kind of split into two main categories: the community water systems. Those kind of larger water systems, public water supplies that provide water to at least 15 service connections or at least 25 year-round residents. So these are water supplies like New Jersey American Water, or for example, the Mount Olive Water Department, or even live-in facilities like the Matheny School. These would all qualify as community water systems. And then we have non-community water systems, which are again split up into two further categories. But these non-community water systems, they do provide water to individuals that are not year-round residents, but for at least 60 days of the year, they're using that water supply. And so these would include the non-transient, non-community water systems. And these are things like schools. I have some examples here: Hollenbrook School. These are medical centers, hospitals, the Somerset Hills Country Club. So these are supplies that are serving at least 25 of the same people over 6 months of the year. And then you have these transient non-community water systems, which don't meet the definition of the non-transient. And so these are things like highway rest stops and restaurants. They're not supplying water to the same people for great length of time. And so libraries and diners, restaurants and things like that. And then you have private wells kind of off to the side here. Individual homeowners are responsible for their private well system. And so we'll be talking a little bit about different scenarios and different testing requirements for these in this presentation. And you can read through, if you're so inclined, the Safe Drinking Water Act rules, and I've provided the link if you'd like to explore this further. So public water supplies, larger water suppliers, so those serving more than 3,000 residents, they are required to develop an emergency response plan to outline their response when there's a drinking water emergency that disrupts the system's ability to function. And so these emergency events may include, floods or power outages or chemical accidents or explosions, things like that. So these larger water suppliers, they're supposed to have these plans in place. There are templates available so that if you're a water supplier, you have access to a template to ensure that you're complying with this requirement and that you're updating your plan regularly. And we see the importance of this with recent events where we had huge storms like Ida come through. We want to make sure our water suppliers have a plan in place so they're not scrambling at the last minute to deal with these emergency situations. And so these requirement is pursuant to the water allocation rules and the rules and regs governing the licensing of water supply and wastewater treatment system operators. I just wanted to note this so that people are aware that these emergency response plans are largely in place. It is a requirement. And so just so that people know that, this is something that they're supposed to be updating regularly. This would not be for events that result from normal operational disruptions like water main breaks. So as I mentioned, private wells are not protected under the Safe Drinking Water Act. That's for public supplies. And our watershed is actually largely well users. The majority of our residents that live in our watershed use private wells for their drinking water supply. And no federal regulations cover private wells. And before 2002, state regulations applied only to newly constructed wells. Luckily, luckily, I'm sure a lot of work went into it, but the Private Well Testing Act was established in 2002, which requires that wells be tested for a number of contaminants when the home is sold. And so this is a consumer information law or a right to know law that requires the sellers or the buyers of property with wells to test and also includes landlords. So if you're a landlord, you have to test your well water once every 5 years and provide each tenant with a copy of those test results. The New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection receives those results and should a well be tested and come up with an exceedance of one of the limits for one of these contaminants, local health departments are also notified. So under the Private Well Testing Act testing regulations, there are a number of contaminants, as I mentioned, that are required. So this is coliform bacteria, and E. coli if that test comes up positive, nitrates, lead, arsenic, all volatile organic compounds with established limits or MCLs, maximum contaminant levels, gross alpha particle activity, and uranium, iron, manganese, and pH. 3 synthetic organic compounds were also added. And as of December 1st, 2021, the Private Well Testing Act now requires the testing for 3 PFAS or per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. So that's PFNA, PFOA, and PFOS. So all of the results are valid for 1 year, except the coliform, which is valid for 6 months. And the law does not require that remediation be done. So again, it's a right to know law. So those test results have to be provided to the buyer at or before closing. And then it just becomes a point of negotiation for the sale. So, it can be the seller that puts treatment in or the buyer, or if the buyer decides not to, they really don't have to do anything at all. And so, and again, the lab results, they go to the DEP, and the DEP requires the health department. And the health department may notify affected neighboring homes and businesses, but they're not required to. And often this comes down to the capacity of the local health department as to whether or not they have the resources to do this outreach. Oftentimes they speak with homeowners and they assume that someone's going to tell them, if there's an issue nearby, that there are homes nearby with high levels or one or more contaminants. And I let them know that that's not necessarily the case. It's still very important for them to do their own testing because this is not a requirement for the health department to notify them. So that's important to note. So that's kind of where we come in though. So the Private Well Testing Act, again, it requires testing from when you sell your home. But it's important to do testing not just when you're moving in or out of a home, but to monitor your water quality regularly. And so it's best to do at least a bacteria and nitrate test once a year. And here are some photos of our community well testing program in action. We help residents to do their testing to protect their family's health while they're actually living in the home and they're using their water. So we do this testing throughout the watershed and partner with a number of the municipalities, most of the municipalities in our watershed. The well testing program at Raritan Headwaters was established back in 1974. And we test about 1,500 wells a year and have thousands of records that helps us monitor groundwater quality throughout our watershed. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the impacts to water supplies. Before I get into PFAS, I know a number of you may be here to learn more about PFAS, but we have ongoing issues and have with water supply, particularly with private wells, related to both weather events and also the age of wells. And every system in your home really needs maintenance, and that goes for the well and your septic systems as well. So any well water system, if it's deep or shallow, can become contaminated with bacteria, sewage, heating oil, agricultural waste or chemicals. And people with private drinking water wells should assume that their water is contaminated if there's a flooding event nearby. It's very important that municipalities alert residents to the dangers of drinking contaminated well water and provide information on how to have their water tested by a certified lab. That's really the only way to know for sure that your water is safe to drink. And so again, we have our well testing program, which is accessible year-round through our 2 offices. You can sign up to pick up a well test kit at testmywell.org or see the calendar of community well testing events that we have coming up. And as a municipal leader, you can also list a list of certified labs that residents may contact should they be concerned about their water quality or just to do their regular monitoring every year. So you can visit those links there. And also, if you wanted to copy them to your municipal website so that residents have access to that important information. Drought also impacts water quality and quantity. It reduces dilution of contaminants in both surface and groundwater and boosts pollutant concentrations in water supplies. It can lower water tables and make existing wells more unreliable. And they can trigger more intense groundwater pumping that puts stress on shallow aquifers. There's also the potential for a shift in contamination plumes, and studies have shown that drought can also lead to an increase in arsenic concentration, which is a very prevalent issue in our watershed, and in particular in Hunterdon and Somerset counties, where we're in the Piedmont region here, so which has generally a higher arsenic concentration than, say, up in the Highlands. So here's a map of the U.S. Drought Monitor. This is a website that you can access, and shows a map of the entire nation's drought status. And so this is the most current map here. And just for reference, this is actually what it looks. And you can see over in New Jersey, we are in a moderate drought still. So just because it rains a few times doesn't mean necessarily out of the woods. But this is the map from last year around this time. And you can see the West was having really severe, exceptional drought, and we were not experiencing drought. And so year to year can obviously vary and lead to changes in water quality and quantity. So it's important to discuss lead as well. Lead can be an issue in both private well systems and also public water supplies. So really, this is a pipe issue, typically not a groundwater issue. And this can be exacerbated by changes in groundwater chemistry. So acidic water tends to dissolve lead or lead solder into the water, and high chlorides or salts can also make lead more soluble. And so road salts, issues with higher chloride levels in our groundwater and surface water has led to increases in lead issues in water supplies. And lead is particularly harmful to young children. In 1986, an amendment to the Safe Drinking Water Act limited the allowable lead content in plumbing materials. So typically we say, if you live in an older home built before about 1986, you're at higher risk of lead contamination in your water supply. But lead can come from well pump components or fixtures as well. So it's important to test your water for lead every 5 years, or if you do something to change your water chemistry, like put in a water softener or a new fixture, if you buy an old brass faucet out of eBay or something, you may want to make sure that you don't have lead in your water. But the test again is recommended for both public water users and well users. And it's important for public water users to realize that their supplier's responsibility really ends at their property line. So the service line that goes from the main line in the street, the main water line in the street, into your home, as well as the interior plumbing, may contain lead. And so the water supplier will be testing for lead when the water goes out, but they're not testing every faucet. They're not going to every home to test each house for lead. So it's important for homeowners to do that on their own, just to ensure that they don't have high levels there, which would pose a health concern. And just to note too about lead, we do have a lead in drinking water toolbox on our website if you'd like to learn more about lead. And there's also one for arsenic up there as well, which has a lot of resources on arsenic in our watershed and what to do about it. So we'll talk a little bit about PFAS. Actually, we'll talk a lot about PFAS. So what are they? These forever chemicals that everyone is talking about. Well, PFAS stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. And these are called emerging contaminants of concern, even though they've been produced and used in a wide range of consumer and industrial applications for decades. You have PFAS in your blood, as do I, and virtually all Americans. The group contains several categories of classes of durable chemicals and materials with properties that include oil and water and temperature and fire resistance. Drinking water contamination occurs as a result of industrial releases, uses of firefighting foams, and they're used in a wide range of products, from food packaging to stain-resistant furniture, and our exposure comes from multiple sources and routes. Non-stick cookware is the one that everyone kind of thinks of when they think of PFAS. But also, waterproof clothing and stain-resistant coatings for carpets and upholstery. Those are other sources of PFAS. They're highly water soluble. They're mobile and persistent, hence they're forever, or we call them forever chemicals, and they pose serious health threats to consumers. They accumulate in the human body, and exposure to low concentrations of contaminants in drinking water increases in the blood over many years many years after exposure ends. There have been found to be significant levels of PFAS in biosolids as well, which are the wastewater sludge. That's a product that is applied to farm fields as fertilizer. And so there are a lot of studies done to show that wells that are near properties where they're applying these biosolids are coming up quite high in PFAS. So it's definitely a consideration, particularly in more rural areas. like in our watershed, where there are a lot of farm fields. And so this is ongoing research, and the state of Maine has recently enacted legislation to ban PFAS from biosolids and ban them from being applied to land. There is treatment available for PFAS, and so they're pretty widely available. They're granular activated carbon, or GAC filters, that can be installed in homes to treat PFAS. And so really the first step is to test for them to see if they're present. And then again, treatment is available for these contaminants. A little bit more about the health effects of PFAS. PFOA has been linked with high cholesterol, kidney and testicular cancer, thyroid disease, ulcerative colitis, PFOS, also cholesterol, and decreased antibody response. And so we want to eliminate them from our water supplies. So again, it's important to test for them so that we can put the treatment in to protect our health. The New Jersey Department of Health does have a PFAS fact sheet that is up on our website if you'd like to learn more about the health effects of exposure to PFAS. And the link here is provided. So what's been done to address contamination with PFAS in New Jersey and beyond? It has been recently added to the New Jersey list of hazardous substances, which gives the Department of Environmental Protection additional authority under the Spill Act to respond to discharges. The PFOA, PFOS, and PFNA are required for community supply wells, including schools and businesses. Their testing is required under the Private Well Testing Act and for all community and non-transient, non-community water supplies. We've established groundwater quality standards, and PFAS, these three PFAS have been included in the New Jersey Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit application testing requirements, and we're currently developing surface water quality standards and soil remediation standards. And as I mentioned, Maine has banned the use of biosolids that contain PFAS, and I'm hoping that New Jersey follows suit. So the drinking water standards that have been set for these three PFAS are some of the strictest in the nation. Really no level of these is safe to drink, but we do have very protective standards in place, much more protective than the federal standards. And as I mentioned, these requirements are now, these tests are now required for when you sell a home in New Jersey with a private well, and they're also a requirement for the public water supplies. So they have to monitor for these contaminants and also take action to eliminate these PFAS from the water that is being delivered to customers if they're found at levels that exceed the standards. So what resources are available to those faced with PFAS contamination? There are multiple funding sources available depending on the type of water supply. The Spill Fund is available to residents, municipalities, and businesses in New Jersey. Claims for potable water damages and treatment made by homeowners and schools and childcare facilities do take priority. It's important to note here, though, that if you knew or should have known about the contamination, if you should have known that there were PFAS in the water supply, you are not eligible for Spill Fund funding. So this is like if you buy a home and you have there's a private well on the property, and you received the report during the closing. Once you own that property, you are then ineligible for the Spill Fund because you bought the property with the information that PFAS contamination was present. And so we've had a number of residents come to us even after they've moved in since December of 2021, when this testing became a requirement. And we have to tell them, unfortunately, that they are not eligible for spill fund monies. And it's important also to tell people that, just because they received the report, they may not be getting much guidance from their real estate agent or anyone else for that matter, as far as how to read that report and what should be done with that information on the water quality on their private well supply. So it's important, if you're buying a home, to make sure you look at that report and consult someone who, if you're not sure what you're looking at. So spill fund claims, we've guided a number of homeowners through this process. It does require that 2 tests be performed. So there's an initial test and then a confirming water test to confirm that your concentration of PFAS or another contaminant that would qualify, like a volatile organic compound, is in fact over the set limit, the set MCL or maximum contaminant level. If and only if the result is over that level, are you eligible for spill fund monies? So another issue we've had recently with homeowners is that they're coming to us concerned that their level of PFAS is just under the limit and they are then ineligible. And unfortunately, that is the case. So they do have to pursue other avenues for having their water treated. Anyone applying for spill fund monies that do have PFAS or volatile organic compounds or other contaminants over the limit, they have to get 3 estimates for point of entry treatment systems, or find out if a water supply line is available, what it would cost to hook up to that system, and also what it would cost to seal the well. The cost and installation of the point of entry system may be covered by the DEP as long as, again, the resident meets a specific set of standards. And there's more information on spill claims, both on the DEP website, and you may also call the Environmental Claims Administration, which handles the spill fund claims. So what resources are available for water supply systems dealing with PFAS contamination? Well, for community and non-community water systems, funding is available through the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. This fund can be used to treat PFAS or other unregulated contaminants. It can be used for replacing lead service lines. It can be used for locating the lead service lines, rehabilitating contaminated sources. And there's also a program going on right now called the Small Systems Engineering Contract Initiative through the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, in which small public water systems, so those serving less than about 3,000 customers, can seek funding assistance through the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund and receive funding to cover engineering and design costs, which would then enable them to apply for the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund program. And this program eliminates the need for small water systems to utilize their own resources to pay for those expensive engineering costs, and to ensure that the system design will be cost effective. And so that program is going on right now, and the link is there. You can visit that for more information. So for private well owners who may not qualify for spill fund, so the spill fund doesn't cover naturally occurring contaminants like arsenic or gross alpha, which is a screen for uranium and radium, things like that. So, so there is another resource available to those homeowners who have tested their water and have identified a contaminant over the maximum contaminant level. So single family residences whose drinking water comes from a well are eligible for this program. It's a no-interest loan, and it may be used for treatment or for paying for hooking up to a public water supply or alternative supply. And the maximum loan amount is $10,000. And this is a program that is offered through the New Jersey Housing and Mortgage Finance Agency. There's a fact sheet available. I'll put it up on our website, and then you can also call the information number to get more information for that. Well, we've had a few homeowners successfully go through that program as well, which helps if they don't have the money to pay for an expensive treatment system upfront. It's just one more resource available. So for even more information, there are a number of resources which provide water quality data and maps. We've actually recently developed a map that shows data that's been collected through our well testing program. The PFAS is not on there yet, but will be added soon. And you can visit this map and explore it at your leisure by accessing it through our homepage, so raritanheadwaters.org. Another great resource is NJ GeoWeb. I use this resource all the time. It's got a whole bunch of layers that you can access by clicking that stack of, it's like a stack of papers there on the upper right. The layer I have highlighted here is the purveyor map. So you can see all in light blue are those areas that are serviced by a public water supply. You can click on any particular area on this map, and it'll tell you what water supplier is servicing that area. So it's really handy to know, if you're speaking with a resident or you're even not sure where your own water comes from, you can explore, where you live and see, is there a service, a public water supply nearby? Am I dealing with helping a resident who's on private well or public water? So this is a really handy tool. There are a number of layers on this website. And so, so you click the little stack of papers there, and then there'll be a drop-down menu. You click water, and then you click on purveyor to access this map. Another layer that I use on this site frequently is the groundwater contamination area layer. There's also information on areas where there are immediate environmental concern sites. And so this site is worth exploring if you're not familiar with it. It's a great resource. Another terrific resource is the New Jersey Drinking Water Watch that's provided by the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. This website enables users to view drinking water information for New Jersey water systems, and that includes all community, non-transient, non-community, and transient non-community water supplies. And I told you at the beginning of the presentation that this information is important because these are different categories that you should be aware of if you're exploring different systems to find out more information. This website also has information on violations for a particular water supply, the service areas that it covers, the number of people that water supply is serving, all of their testing schedules, information on who the licensed operator is for that water supply. And so they make it even easier on the homepage of this website. You can just start to explore by just clicking on the county map that you're interested in. And it gives you a whole list of every water supply in that area. And you can then filter like an Excel sheet if you use Excel by the type of system or the town that it's serving or what have you. So you can see kind of across the top on these tabs, you can explore there the different chemical results, the monitoring schedules, etc. So a newer resource that's a little bit more user-friendly, is a really great tool, is Jersey Water Check. And this website was created by Jersey Water Works to tell the story of our state's water and water infrastructure needs. It really helps residents learn about the water in their state and their community and get connected with their local drinking water and wastewater service providers. It provides facts and data and metrics, all kinds of useful information and cost-effective solutions useful to utilities as well. The Jersey Water Check website is part of Jersey Waterworks, which is a collaborative of diverse stakeholders, including utilities and advocacy organizations. So you can also use this website to help with your Sustainable Jersey municipal water story action. And so, again, it's a great resource for data gathering for that action. And you can use that system finder tab at the top there that's highlighted to navigate to specific drinking water and wastewater systems. The Private Well Testing Act also provides information on all of the data collected through those home sales that we discussed earlier. The DEP has this interactive map where you can type in, I don't know if you can see my cursor here, but there's a magnifying glass there. You click on that and you type in your address, and it'll zoom into where you live. And then each one of those grids is a 2 square mile area, and it shows it's kind of color coded and then gives more detailed information on the prevalence of contamination for the main contaminants that are tested under the Private Well Testing Act. So what I have here is the map for fecal coliform or E. coli, and so the darker blue squares generally indicate that there's E. coli is more prevalent in those areas. And again, you can zoom into this map and search for particular addresses, and it gives you that information. And the reason this is put in this grid format is to protect the privacy of individual homeowners. So they're not giving you data on individual wells, they're giving you the compiled data for each one of those grids, those 2 square mile areas. And the maps that are available through our website too, that we've collected through our well testing program, are outlined in a similar way to protect people's privacy. And that's very important to us and the DEP. The Environmental Working Group has also just recently published some terrific interactive maps detailing the locations and concentrations of PFAS throughout the country. I came across this recently, and it's very useful just to see kind of how our systems compare to other parts of the country. Unfortunately, New Jersey lights up pretty bright when you zoom out and you look at the whole country. We do have quite an issue here, but we're also doing a lot more testing, so I'll be fair. So I'd really just like to bring it back on some closing remarks. I'd like to bring it back to the watershed level and tie this discussion into some of the other work that we do at RHA. So groundwater and surface water are not separate resources. It's all one water supply. And when our activities use one of these resources, it often affects the other in a relatively short time frame in terms of quantity and quality. Infiltration through the floodplain to the underlying groundwater table is one of the reasons why maintaining floodplains and riparian buffers is a very important consideration in development planning and in climate change adaptation planning. Nature's way of capturing, storing, and purifying runoff has been lost in many locations. And besides worsening both floods and droughts, this wetland loss has allowed large quantities of nitrogen, phosphorus, and PFAS from farm fertilizers to drain directly into rivers and streams, which then carry these pollutants to the coasts, fueling algal blooms en route and in the ocean. So in addition to riparian protection and restoration and preserving open space and wetlands, green infrastructure or rain gardens, as one example, can help with many water quality and quantity issues, from reducing the impacts of flooding, water quality, building drought resilience. Stormwater runoff is one of the fastest growing sources of pollution. When rain hits the rooftops and parking lots, instead of wetlands and forests, it tends to run into storm drains that are directly connected to our waterways. So installing green infrastructure, such as this beautiful rain garden you see here, can help replenish local groundwater reserves and act as filters for pollutants. All right. So again, these resources and more are being added to our municipal toolkit on our webpage. And again, we'll be hosting a number of Watershed Tools for local leaders, webinars and workshops in the fall and winter. So please visit our website and be on the lookout for invitations to future events. All right, that's all I have for you today, and we'll open it up to questions. Anyone has anything that I missed or would like to discuss further, please don't hesitate. We have about 10 or 15 minutes left until the top of the hour. And I'll put my video back on. Christy, did we get any questions in as I was going through?
Not yet.
Okay. We'll give it a minute and see if, and if not, we'll close out a little bit early. I'm wondering if anyone that's on today has tested their own, if they're on private well, and if so, if they've tested their own well for PFAS or any other contaminants. I actually just recently tested my well. I'm in Hunterdon County, and I had PFAS in my well. Luckily, it wasn't over the maximum contaminant level. We're seeing about half of the wells that we've been testing come up with some level of PFAS contamination. And maybe about 10 or 15% have one of the 3 PFAS at a level that's over the limit. So that was a surprise to me. And actually both schools where my children go to school have both had issues with PFAS. At least one of the PFAS being detected at a level that was over the limit. So it is popping up in places where we kind of least expected it, and in areas that we didn't think would be too much of a concern. You know, the studies of PFAS, they were really focused on military bases and firefighting training facilities and places where they kind of expected that these PFAS contaminants would be found. And unfortunately, it's much more widespread. So we have a lot of both private, residents and smaller systems kind of scrambling to deal with this issue. So please be patient with Spill Fund if you find that you have to access that, because I'm sure they've been inundated with claims over the last year or so. And it's kind of relatively new to a lot of people, so I'm kind of figuring it out.
We have a question in the chat. How did Hurricane Ida impact well water quality in the Upper Raritan?
Thank you. Yeah, so that's a great question. So flooding definitely brought an increase in bacteria contamination in wells throughout our watershed. And so we had municipalities kind of really struggling to meet the demand after Ida. We had a lot of people very concerned with the flooding, that their wells were contaminated, and again, we did see an increase in prevalence. And so, there are kind of, as I mentioned earlier, there are varying degrees of capacity and ability to meet the demand. And for testing and for addressing these issues as they come up. But we had a lot of people who were really unsure that their water supply was safe because of that flooding. And we tested a lot of wells right after Ida, which, it was good to see that more people were testing, but I know, unfortunately, there were a lot of people who just weren't aware and didn't do that testing.
Another question. How can I test my well?
Oh, good question. I'm surprised I didn't cover that. Well, you can call us. We'd be happy to put together a testing kit and talk about your specific concerns and your testing history. And you would then pick that up at one of our 2 offices, or you can participate in one of the community well testing events that we have on our calendar, and that's all available through our website. The easiest way to get there would be to go to testmywell.org. There are also a number of state certified drinking water testing labs that you can call, and they can also do the testing for you. Tends to be a little more expensive for them to send someone out to take the samples for you. So our program is more affordable and a little bit more convenient for people to be able to access that testing kind of on demand. And then also we provide guidance depending on what comes up. We'll give you information so that you can take the next steps to protect your water supply, or treatment recommendations and things like that.
Another question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe residents are aware that drought can increase contaminants in their well water?
No, I don't think that's well known. Because it's not, flooding is more intense, more obvious, right? So when you see surface water kind of going near your well, flooding your well, it definitely raises red flags for people, whereas drought is kind of this silent problem that we're not entirely aware of. As long as the water is still coming out of the tap, people don't really think about it. So no, I think that it's definitely something that we can improve awareness of, is how drought can impact water quality.
We have another question.
Mm-hmm.
After a flood, what are the most likely contaminants in well water?
Yeah, so coliform bacteria and E. coli would definitely be the most prevalent and concerning after a flood. But other contaminants can be mobilized with floodwater. You think about inundated septic systems, right? And so you have nitrates, and you have volatile organic compounds. You have possibly, heating oil tanks that may have been disrupted or flooded and mobilizing contaminants. You have more contaminants being moved off of agricultural areas and roadways, and through people's homes, unfortunately, tragically, that can mobilize additional contaminants, and they can end up in groundwater and in well water. And so contamination can get into your well through groundwater or over the top of the well. Sometimes there are structural issues with a well where the well is not quite as secure as it could be. So something as simple as the grout around the top of your, well, or the well cap being loose or not watertight. So there's, it is important to maintain your system and to have it inspected regularly as well to ensure that the system is secure. And like anything, as it ages, it can start to kind of wear out and not be as sound.
Another
Well,
question. What do you say to people who are afraid to test their wells because of what they may find?
yeah, well, this is a tough one. I suppose ignorance is bliss, right? But no, I mean, it can be scary for people. We generally have very, very good groundwater quality in our watershed. And so we try to reassure people that treatment is available. Everything that we test for has an associated and recommended treatment system that may be installed. And the costs vary, but for a number of these contaminants, even just what's called a point of use filter, something that goes, under your kitchen sink and just treats, say, your main drinking water source, like your kitchen sink. It may be a few $100s, which I know is still cost prohibitive for a lot of people, but once you get the testing done, and that's the first step, I know people are kind of afraid sometimes to find out what's in there. But once they do know, I mean, there are resources, as we kind of went through some of them in this presentation, there are resources available to help people. And you think about how much money we spend on medical expenses. When some of our medical issues may be avoided if we made sure that we had a safe water source. It's pretty basic health information. You want to make sure that you're drinking clean and safe water. It's probably one of the best things that you can do to protect your health. And unfortunately, doctors are not often asking people where their water supply, where their drinking water comes from. And it should be a question that is at the top of the list, because it does have a huge impact on health. And especially after these intense, storm events, or when we're in a drought or something that can impact water quality. This is really, it's really basic. It's a first step, I think. And so it's our job, and, others to raise awareness of these issues and to try to walk people through what can be a very complicated and intimidating process. So, yeah. And, if a well has bacteria in it, I mean, it may be a relatively easy, inexpensive fix. If a well is inundated with flood water and needs to be treated, a lot of homeowners tackle that themselves. They have to chlorinate the well, which is like, sanitize the well. And then that may get them right back into, having a safe water supply again. And a lot of those resources are available on our website as well. We help people, find the information they need to take those steps.
One more question. How often should homeowners test their well?
Every year. Yeah, so the best practice is every year test for at least coliform bacteria, E. coli, and nitrates. That's the recommendation from the Department of Health, local health departments, EPA, DEP. So that's best practice, and those are two basic water quality indicators. So we can't test for everything under the sun, right? So the coliform bacteria and nitrates are used as an indication to show whether or not you have surface contaminants getting in there, whether or not you may want to do follow-up testing. So those are basic sanitary quality tests, basic potability tests. Then something like arsenic, you'd want to do about every 5 years, particularly or every 3 to 5 years or so, depending on what area you're in. Again, some areas arsenic is more prevalent than others. Hunterdon and Somerset counties tends to be more prevalent than, say, up in the Highlands in Morris County. If you're treating for something that you know is there, you want to make sure you're doing monitoring also, so that if you install the treatment system, you want to make sure it's still working. So that's important as well. Other contaminants, you may not, it may not be advised to do them as frequently. So the array of volatile organic compounds, which are these man-made chemicals, things like toluene and benzene and chloroform, and a whole list of things that really long names, trichloroethylene. So those every maybe 5 to 7 years, the plumes of volatile organics and other contaminants can move really, really slowly through groundwater. So something like that isn't going to change overnight, but you want to make sure that you're keeping up on your monitoring to ensure that something hasn't changed that could impact your health. And the menu of options that we provide kind of gives guidance on the frequency for the different tests. So not everyone is required, or suggested every year. As far as the perfluoroalkyl compounds, the PFAS, right now the current guidance is to do it at least once. Unfortunately, it's an expensive test, and we're looking for resources to help homeowners do this test. It's unfortunately just cost prohibitive for a lot of people to do the test. So it's difficult. If we could do every test for free, of course we would. But it is important to do the test, but we do realize that it's difficult for some people to be able to manage that. So that's why we try to provide the maps, so that we can at least provide some information on risks and vulnerabilities, so that people can make sound decisions when it comes to testing and also for treatment. All right, well, I think we're over. 4 minutes over. Well, thank you for all the questions, and thank you again for joining us today. Yeah, please get in touch if you have any questions. Reach out to us individually, or again, explore our website to find out more information.